Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. Yeah!
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to go over some reasons why your pool filter may have really high PSI. This is the pressure gauge on top of the filter. You may notice a really high reading on the pressure gauge on top. And I'll go over some of the reasons why this could happen with your pool. Leslie's Pool Supplies is a proud partner of the Pool Guy Podcast Show. Leslie's Pool Supplies has been do-it-yourselfers and pool trade professionals' trusted partner since 1963, providing quality products and services to make pool care easy and solutions and expertise to do it right. So I guess I'll unpack first what the pressure gauge on top of the filter is indicating in the first place. Basically, the way the pool flows is that the skimmer or main drain or a combination of both will, that's where the water gets pulled into the pool by the pump. The pump has a diffuser and an impeller in there, and depending on the horsepower of the pump is how fast the water is pulled in to the filtration system, and depending on how big your filter is how fast the water will flow back to the pool. So on top of the filter is this pressure gauge with a dial, and it goes from 0 to 60, and this measures the pounds per square inch, the pressure inside the filter tank. So if, for instance, the filter is brand new out of the box, you install it, and I'm just going to use a cartridge filter for an example, and you put it in there, and it's a Pentair Clean and Clear 420 square foot cartridge filter, and you turn on your equipment, and the filter pressure is at 15 psi, and the water is flowing tremendously through the return lines. It's being pulled into the skimmer rapidly. You're getting really good flow, and when this cartridge filter starts to get dirty, the gauge on top the little arrow or little dial on top will start rising from the 15 psi of the brand new filter, and it may go up to 20 or 25 psi, and this will indicate that the filter is getting dirty because there's more pressure inside the filter, which means the water is not flowing at the high rate it was at the beginning when it was at 15 psi. You're actually losing a lot of flow. You notice that the skimmer is not pulling the water very rapidly, and that the pool return lines in a lot of cases aren't returning the water very rapidly. So this is an important indicator that the filtration system is dirty and that you have to clean the filter, or there's another problem causing the high PSI or the high pressure on the gauge. So let me go over some of the reasons why you may notice the pressure on your filter being high in the pool. And I'll go over the first one, which is the most dangerous situation, but also the rarest situation, and that is a blockage in the return line. And generally, if there's a blockage in the return line, the filter PSI will go from 0 rapidly above 30 to 40, maybe even higher at a very rapid pace once the pool turns on. You may even see the filter tank actually bulge out from the pressure inside the filter. And a blockage on the return line could be a number of things. The most common blockage that I find is with a cartridge filter or a D filter with a salt water system, and the salt cell is highly calcified, which means that it hasn't been cleaned in a while and there's calcium on the plates, and maybe the cartridge, when you cleaned it, some debris got through there, or the D filter has a hole in the grid and some DE and debris is jammed in there, and the debris gets jammed onto the salt cell itself, causing a pretty good sized blockage, and then you'll see the high PSI. I've had a pool where a part of a heater broke off and got lodged into the check valve, causing the blockage in the return line. Usually if there's a blockage in the return line, the skimmer is not going to work, and so if you check the skimmer, you'll notice that the water is not really being pulled into the pool, and this indicates a blockage. That means that whatever the water is in the pump can't go past the filter, or can't go from the filter back to the return line, and so it's pretty much the back pressure from this is causing the filter PSI to raise rapidly, and this also affects the suction of the pool. So if there is a blockage, you're not going to have any suction pretty much from the skimmer. and that's a good indication that there's a blockage in the line causing the high PSI. Again, a blockage on the return side is pretty rare, but it can happen, so keep that in mind. Sometimes the customer may turn off, or if you have a water feature that's using the return line, they may have overturned the Jandy valve, turning off the return line. I've had that happen once also. So there could be some other type of blockage on the return line, but usually the PSI will spike rapidly when you turn it on if there is a blockage on the line, and it's not going to be a gradual kind of increase on the pressure gauge. It'll go really quick, up from 0 to past 30 rapidly, and that's when you turn off the power quickly because the filter tank could actually explode in that case. Another problem to eliminate is the fact that the pressure gauge itself is not working. So when you turn the pool off, make sure that the dial should drop pretty rapidly to 0. If the pressure gauge isn't working, it may get hung up at 10 or 15 psi, so that when you do turn it on, it may show 30 or 40 psi, which may not be the actual psi in the filter because the gauge isn't working. Sometimes you can tap the gauge and that gets it working again, and that'll give you a better reading. Sometimes if you turn on the pool and the gauge doesn't move at all, that means that of course the gauge is broken completely. So make sure that the gauge is actually working and giving the correct PSI. So eliminate the blockage and eliminate the fact that the gauge may not be working, and then you can go to the next step to find out why the pressure in the filter is so high. So let me touch on sand filters first. The sand filter is a little bit different than the D and cartridge in the fact that there's really technically no element in there. Of course, there's sand in there, but there's no actual element, which is the filter grids on a D filter or the cartridges on a cartridge filter. There's actually nothing to change in the sand filter except the sand itself if you're having a high PSI problem. There may be channeling going on if the sand is really old in the pool, but typically the sand filter doesn't have a huge problem with high PSI. If you're starting at 20 PSI and you backwash the sand filter, generally it drops back down to the 20 PSI again. However, if you do have a sand filter where the PSI is going up rapidly within 1 or 2 days, it could be a problem that I'm going to mention later in the podcast, or it could be that the sand needs to be replaced. The sand is too old in there. And so typically if you have a sand filter and you're dealing with high PSI after backwashing, it's probably time to change the sand in that sand filter, and definitely that would be the number one problem that you run into with a sand filter. Now with the D filter and the cartridge filter, if the cartridges are old in the filter, and especially if it's a single cartridge filter, the PSI is going to rise rapidly with an old cartridge filter. You can take it out, hose it off, clean it, and you put it back together, and let's say it's at 14 or 15 PSI, and it goes up to 25 PSI by the next day or a day or two, then you pretty much can be guaranteed that that cartridge is no good. Replacing the cartridge should cure that problem. If you have a four cartridge filter type, the larger ones, and you may not notice that the PSI raising rapidly in those. I noticed that the gauge on those, the PSI doesn't change very often in those filters, but if they're more than 3 years old, I suggest replacing them to increase the flow to your pool. If you have a D filter and you just recently cleaned it, you hosed off the grids, you recharged it with diatomaceous earth, and you put the right amount in there, not too much, not too little, and you notice that the PSI went up on the gauge from the 20 at the clean point to 30 within a week, then more than likely the grids are no good on your D filter. There's a couple other things that could cause this. I'll go over that in a second here. But basically, the grids are probably good for 3 or 4 years also, and then they need to be replaced. They have a lifespan also, and they can time out. And if you have a quad DE filter with the cartridge type DE grids, those also need to be replaced on a regular basis. Also with a DE filter, if you put too little diatomaceous earth in there or too much diatomaceous earth in the filter, it could also cause the high PSI. With too little diatomaceous earth, the filter is not going to operate effectively, and so it's not going to trap the dirt and debris that it needs to, and this will cause the pressure to rise pretty rapidly. With too much diatomaceous earth in there, you pack it into the cartridges too much, and it can't really filter the water properly, and therefore that'll cause the PSI to go up also. So be aware that you have to actually put the recommended amount of diatomaceous earth back into your DE filter so that it's going to operate properly, and having too little or too much DE in the filter will also cause the high filter PSI. I get this email a lot from people that contact me through YouTube or my website, and that they clean their filter and they put everything back together, whether it's DE or cartridge, and the filter PSI is back up to the high pressure very rapidly, so it's back up to 30 PSI the next day after they cleaned it. So I always ask them first, how old are the elements in the filter, which is referring to the cartridges or the grids in a DE filter. And then the next question I ask is, how does the water look? Is it cloudy? Has it been green recently? And usually 9 out of 10 times they'll say, yeah, we're doing a green to clean and the pool's coming back and now it's kind of milky blue. I can't see the bottom yet, but the filter's having problems filtering out the water. And generally speaking, I can tell from that the reason why the filter PSI is going up so rapidly is because of the water quality. So with the sand filter also, the water quality is a factor with the high filter pressure, because a lot of organics and a lot of particles are moving through the filter system, being pulled into the filter from the pump, and this in turn will coat and saturate the grids, the cartridges, and the sand, causing the pressure in the filter to rise. And so the water quality is a big factor when you're talking about high PSI. So if the water is cloudy, if you're just recovering from a green pool, the chances are that the filter PSI is going to rise pretty rapidly the next day. Until the water is clear enough to see the bottom, clear enough to swim in, the high PSI may be an issue you're going to be dealing with as you're cleaning up the pool and trying to clear up the cloudy water. So it's kind of a battle to clear up a green pool and a cloudy pool with the filter, with your system filter, because of that reason. So there are a few things you can do to kind of help the process along. There's a process called flocking, or flock, when you flock the pool, and that's adding a flock agent to the pool, which will actually, a lot of clarifiers have this agent in them, where it clumps up the organic debris in the pool and it will drop it to the bottom so you can vacuum it out. So with a sand filter, this is a very common way to clear up a cloudy pool or a green pool. With the cartridge and DE filter, it's not as common, but if you're having a problem with the PSI rising rapidly because of the water quality, you may want to try this method. So the flocculant, or flock, is an aluminum sulfate product. And so to flock a pool, you basically, if you have a sand filter, you're going to run your pool you're going to add the flock to the pool, then you're going to run the pool for 1 hour on recirculate mode, and then you're going to turn everything off for 24 to 48 hours. If you have a DE or cartridge filter, you can add the flocculant and run the pool as normal for an hour to circulate the flocculant, the flock agent, in your pool, and then you can turn everything off for 24 to 48 hours. And this will drop everything down to the bottom of the pool, and then you can vacuum it out. If you have a sand filter, you can vacuum out the waste. The problem with the DE and a cartridge filter is that when you vacuum all of it into the filter, the PSI is going to go up, you're going to lose suction, and so you'll have a battle in that respect. So if you're having if you do this for a living, pool service for a living, I suggest building a portable cleanup pump so you can actually vacuum out the pools that you're cleaning up directly to the drain in the house or the sewer. And if you can also get a portable filtration system, anything you can use to bypass the actual filter, unless it's a sand filter or a DE filter with a multi-port valve where you can actually vacuum out the waste. And when you vacuum the waste, you actually bypass the filter. So a lot of cases with a cartridge filter and a DE filter, you can't do that. And so that's one reason why we don't flock the pools. What we normally do is we raise the chlorine level and keep it at a high level. We keep the pool circulating, and then we continuously clean the filter. So if it's a DE filter, you'll be backwashing it or taking it apart until the pool clears up. And with the cartridge filter, the same thing. You'll be cleaning the cartridge every day or every other day until the pool actually clears up. But you can use a flock agent in the pool to speed up the process if you're having high filter PSI because of the poor water quality of the pool. So as you can see, besides the actual filter elements being the problem, the water quality is also one reason why the filter pressure goes up rapidly. One way also to kind of help if you're dealing with a pool that has cloudy water and the pool may have been green prior to that and you're having trouble turning it around, sometimes replacing the cartridge or putting new DE grids in there moves the needle significantly in the right direction. So don't rule out the fact that maybe the cartridges aren't that old or the grids maybe are just 2 years old. You can definitely replace those, and that may help turn the pool around and allow the water quality to bounce back so that you can get out of the vicious cycle of the filter pressure going up, causing bad water quality, or vice versa. So changing the elements in there is a great way to kind of speed that whole process up. So another thing that would cause high filter PSI would be when you put your pool in the spa mode. And this is very normal. A lot of people get freaked out about it because they feel like something's wrong. But technically, when you move the valves to spa mode, the PSI in the filter will go up, sometimes even 10 PSI, because of just how everything is plumbed and the fact that the water is isolated in the spa, which causes more pressure in the filter because of just the way it's designed. So when you put your pool into spa mode, if you have an attached spa, don't be surprised that if your normal operating PSI is 20, that it could go up to 25. And I've seen some spa modes where the filter PSI will go to 30 PSI. So it will rise because of that reason. When you put it in spa mode, there's a good chance the PSI will go up. So keep that in mind and don't feel like there's something wrong with your pool in spa mode. That's perfectly normal for it to go up when you change the valves over and change the filtration from the pool to the spa and isolate the spa from the pool filtration system. Another thing that could cause the PSI to go up is a return side cleaner connected to your one of the return lines. So if you have a Polaris 360, which is a return side cleaner, which means it's a non-booster pump pressure cleaner, and it's connected to your return line. A lot of times you'll have to maybe cap a return line or reduce a return line to get enough flow to the Polaris 360. And even if you don't do that, just having the Polaris 360 connected to your return line could cause the filter PSI to rise because that creates a lot of back pressure. Basically, some of the return is going into the cleaner itself, which means that the water is not flowing at the full rate that it would flow if it was just an open return line, and this will cause the PSI to rise in your filter. And I've seen pools with a pressure cleaner make the PSI go up by 5 PSI, some cases a little bit higher, but typically if you have a full-size D filter and it's normally at 20 PSI and you connect the Polaris 360 to it, don't be surprised if the PSI goes to 25 PSI or 26 or 27. So it can rise 5 or 6 or 7 PSI. It's pretty typical to see the rise in the PSI with a return side cleaner connected. It's not uncommon, so be aware of that fact too. So basically, you just have to go through the process of elimination to see why your pool PSI is higher. Of course, the blockage is the most dangerous, but it's also the rarest. And then you check the gauge to make sure it works. And then you look at the filter itself. Is the sand old in the sand filter causing the PSI to rise rapidly after backwashing it? Are the cartridges old in the cartridge filter? Are the grids old? Also, with the DE filter, you got to make sure you have the right amount of DE in there. And then you move on to the water quality. Is the pool cloudy or was it recently green? And that's a good indicator of the high PSI being caused by poor water quality. So those are all factors that lead to high filter pressure, and you kind of have to go through the list to get to what typically causes it. And I would say most of the time the filter elements are old in the pool, in the filter, and that's causing the high PSI. And of course, a good rule of thumb is if you clean your filter and the PSI, besides the sand filter, if you clean your cartridge or D filter and the PSI rises within that week back to the dirty level. So when you clean it, it's at 20, and by the end of the week, it's at 30. chances are, if the water is actually clear, that it is the actual elements in the filter that are no good and they need to be replaced. So I replace my customers' cartridges on a regular basis, as well as the grids. I don't let the filter grids go past 3 years, and I certainly don't let the cartridge filters go past 3 years also if it's the larger 4 cartridges. If you have a single cartridge filter, chances are you're going to be changing that cartridge every 3 to 6 months to keep your PSI from spiking in your pool. They don't last quite as long as a larger cartridge filter, so changing the filter elements is a key aspect of keeping the filter pressure low and keeping the flow. I think one of the main problems with high filter PSI is that the pool is not flowing, which leads to a bunch of other problems like poor water quality, which kind of is weird because that could cause the high PSI in the first place, but that will lead to that, and it'll lead to algae. Of course, if you have a suction side cleaner working in your pool, it's not going to move very well because the suction will be a lot lower. You'll have trouble manually vacuuming your pool because of the poor suction, and the general overall flow of the pool will be low, which means that the pool may not be safe to swim in because the water is not circulating. So it is a big issue that needs to be addressed. So if you're dealing with a pool with high PSI or high filter pressure, it's something that needs to be addressed because it leads to other problems. And again, it may make the pool may be unsafe to swim in because of the poor flow and circulation of the water. Plus, it doesn't look good when a pool is not flowing well. You'll have a lot of debris on the surface, of course, debris on the bottom. It just is not going to look like a very clean and well-running swimming pool. And if you do pool service, you've seen these pools, you know what I'm talking about. So definitely address that high PSI, and I hope that one of these problems is what you're experiencing and that you can turn things around with your pool. And if you're a homeowner looking for more resources for your pool care, definitely check out my website at swimmingpoollearning.com. I have an ebook available for $9.99, and I also have a lot of helpful web pages there. And if you do service for a living, definitely check out my coaching program at poolguidecoaching.com. A lot of great discounts and benefits there, as well as the ability to text me or call me as being part of the group member. So you can learn more about my coaching program at poolguidecoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. Leslie's Pool Supplies has been do-it-yourselfers and pool trade professionals' trusted partner since 1963, providing quality products and services to make pool care easy and solutions and expertise to do it right.